The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Para X Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only.
Fox, we're back.
Oh, are we? Oh,
I think so.
God, it feels like a dream. It really does. It's summer 2020. For our audience, we are recording this on June 16th, and it's a nice cool day out there. This will probably premiere sometime in July, but we are back, and we're back with episode 146. Grady Hendrix is a vampire. And I know you're really excited, Phil.
I am, because I am a huge Grady Hendrix fan. He probably doesn't know that about me, but I am. And this is a very nice day. This is a much better day than the first time we tried to attempt this particular episode when the storm came through and knocked out my power for like 2 days.
And mine was
so
fluctuating.
We're finally able to do this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was just horrible.
Though I love a good thunderstorm. My herbs really perked up. My basil is looking green after that. My rosemary jumped up. Nitrogen ions into the soil. So thank you for the thunderstorm. And we got Grady back. We did. We're, talking to him now on Skype.
Yes, and we appreciate it for you coming back and rescheduling. That was wonderful.
My pleasure. I imagine you guys live on like the storm-racked moors or something. It's like sounds very gothic where y'all are.
It is fun.
I'm in Philadelphia.
I used to be.
And you, Fox used to be.
I'm in hell now. It isn't that bad.
We all will wind up there one day.
Indeed. Well, like Mark Twain always said, heaven for climate, hell for company. So, all the good, interesting people are going to hell.
I like that line. That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. So, Fox, I'm in a great mood today.
Okay.
And the reason I'm in such a great mood is because we have an extraordinary guest on the show. He's written for Playboy Magazine, Slate, The Village Voice, The New York Post, Film Comment, and Variety. He is an author, a screenwriter, a Bram Stoker Award winner. His novels include Horror Store, the only novel about a haunted Scandinavian furniture store you'll ever need, named one of the best books of 2014 by National Public Radio. My Best Friend's Exorcism, for which the Wall Street Journal dubbed him a national treasure. We Sold Our Souls, Satan Loves You, Occupy Space, the Bram Stoker award-winning nonfiction tome Paperbacks from Hell, the twisted history of 70s and 80s horror fiction, and his latest novel, released in April, where I attended his virtual release party on Twitter, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Kirkus Reviews has named it his best book yet. I'm a huge fan. #Druncula. Please welcome Grady Hendrix.
Hey, I feel like after that, we should just call it a day. Like, there's no way this is going to live up to any of that. So let's just play it safe. And nice to meet you. I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grady. Good night. No, wait. No, that doesn't work. Because we actually should do the interview. Because Phil's worked very hard on this, and he's been like a giddy little schoolgirl. Grady.
I have. I really have. I'm like Greg with you, like you were with Greg Bear, and you were just like that.
Yeah, that's very true. I was very giddy with Greg Bear. I wanted to mention, Phil, the anthology supporting and applauding Frank Michael Arrington is nearly done. You remember
wonderful.
Frank, and he was always very supportive of horror authors and up at Nikon and stuff, and he passed away last year. Right around this time, actually, right before Alice and I went down to New Orleans, and we were doing an anthology for Kenneth Kane's putting it together in honor of Frank, for everybody who's done a review for, and that will be out very soon. Actually, I wanted to get a little promotion in there.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Grady, we have a lot to get to. Let's just jump right into it. Your writing style, for me personally, is one of the best I've ever seen, mixing horror, humor, top-tier dialogue. Tell us what got you interested in writing. Where did it all begin? And why not mathematician?
That would be a lot more interesting, or probably more lucrative. But, writing's just... I feel like I had some good teachers early on, and so I was never really intimidated by it. And I realized that you could get a lot of effect with some minimal effort in writing, in high school. If you just picked the right subject for an essay, or if you took some kind of edgelord, counterintuitive hot take on something, it would have a bigger ripple effect. But what I wanted to do in high school, at least, in middle school, was make movies. But I was in South Carolina, and there was a lot of equipment, and it just seemed kind of overwhelming to make that happen. And so I started doing plays. And I did a lot of that in high school and university. And then I realized in university that if you're doing plays, if you're directing them and stuff, that you spend most of your time making people show up for rehearsal or asking them why they haven't shown up for rehearsal, and then making them learn their lines. And so I felt like there had to be something where it was down to me. I was the only person who could fail me, and that turned out to be writing, which the loneliest art. I don't need anyone, just myself. And the barrier to entry is pretty inexpensive, right? It's like a pen and paper or a cheap computer. And I was a journalist for a long time. I mean, I started out, my wife and I lived in Hong Kong right after university for a bit, just because we really liked the movies, and we were like, well, what are we going to do? And tickets were pretty cheap. And so we went over there and sort of, just kind of made our way for a while. And when we came back to the States, I realized that there was a real it was the mid-90s, and there was a real burgeoning fan community for Hong Kong movies online and in the fanzines, which were still a thing. And so I kind of started writing for those, but it was all, free labor of love stuff. And I realized that was sort of a niche for myself. And eventually that led to doing journalism, but more, I hate saying journalism because that sounds like the kind of thing people win prizes for. And what I was doing was like pop culture coverage. I was the film critic for a while for a paper. I reviewed books. I wrote about the Asian film business for Variety, and that kind of stuff. But really, it was good to get the chops, to learn how to write to deadline, to learn how to hit your word count, to sort of have to produce that much, you'd have to, because you could make a good living as a freelance journalist pre-2008 in New York. You could do, I don't know, 5 or 6 pieces a week. More like 3 or 4, I guess. I'm exaggerating. But and so it was great to sort of get those tools. But starting in 2008, there was just all journalism died in the street like a dog, and except for like super serious stuff, and even that's not doing so great these days. So I decided to sort of double down, because at that point, gosh, I was in my 30s, and I really didn't have any other skills besides. It was kind of like I either go to law school now or double down on writing, because that's, time only moves in one direction. Right. And so I doubled down on the writing. I went to Clarion Writers Workshop in San Diego, which is a spec fic workshop. And it was at San Diego, University of San Diego, I think. And it was really, really great for me, because I had to take writing fiction seriously, because I was surrounded by people for 6 weeks that I was living with who were taking it really seriously. And and you don't want to be the jerkwad who's like the person treating it like a joke. And so it was really, really nice to sort of get this boot camp where you're forced to take what you do, to approach it in a serious fashion. And that really, that opened a ton of doors. You meet I met a lot of people, and sort of that was 2009. And so 11 years ago, and it's just been one step after another since then.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. I mean, you've really, come up,
Yeah, I mean, I started out doing books with other people. Like I wrote a cookbook with my wife that was a graphic novel. I wrote a couple of YA books with my best friend from high school who was on contract and wanted someone else to write them with because it was just more fun. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like in retrospect, it all seems like an orderly progression. At the time, it all feels like a jumble of bad decisions and missteps.
Between the law school and the writing, I think you made the right decision. I really do.
I don't know, man. I look at friends of mine who are lawyers, and their houses are so much nicer than mine. It's funny. It's only about 2 years ago, I think, maybe even less. 2 years ago, I guess, where I started earning again as much as I did back in 2007 as a freelance writer. That speaks to the fact that freelance writers at the time, journalists, were paid very nicely. Wasn't princely or anything, but it was nice. But it's just like, it's there were I wrote this book, We Sold Our Souls, my kind of heavy metal horror novel, and one of the big things in that book is the main character trying to figure out at what age do you stop? When do you just call it a day? And that's something I really struggled with for a very long time. I mean, and that book really helped me work through that. I mean, just at what point are you or is it perseverance, and what point is it stupidity?
I think it's hard to tell. I could see that theme because, and I read that book. So she's working in a hotel in the beginning. Her, she spent her whole teens, I believe 20s too, in this metal band. And, one person went on to become famous and the rest kind of just didn't, So Yeah,
and it's one of those things where also like, I mean, I think for everyone, we're sort of the heroes of our own stories or the villains. I mean, it depends on how weird and self-aware you are. But I feel like, every now and then I've been hit by that moment in my life where someone I know's done really well, or they've had great stuff happen to them. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I like a bit player in their story? Like, is that who I am? I'm the guy who proofed the manuscript for the person who, went on to win these big awards and make all this money. Like, I mean, it's really, I think especially in your 30s into your early 40s, it's really, really tough to, you need feedback. It's tough to keep going without the feedback. How am I doing? What am I measured against? Am I going in the right direction? I mean, anything. It's a really weird feeling. It's funny. Well, anyways, you've got questions and stuff. I could ramble on in a sort of vaguely entertaining but not really introspective way, but I'd eventually just crawl up my own navel and disappear. So I'll let you drive this bus.
Oh,
no problem. It was very entertaining.
Never driven a bus before, but after watching Doom Patrol, I really want to drive my own bus. So and we are talking.
Oh, do they have? I've never. Is that the show?
It's the show, yeah, on DC Universe. I just binged through it, and I thought it was remarkable and entertaining and funny, and I loved the Misfits.
I loved that comic book growing up. Is the bus? Is it Mr. Nobody's like love bus?
Something like that, yeah.
Oh wow, yeah.
But we are speaking to Grady Hendrix on episode 146 of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show. We're on Parax Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And check out our website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com for every episode has a page before this. All 146 episodes, plus our archive of ghost stories, each with the narrated element, usually by our wonderful English folk singer David Walton, plus articles, interviews, and expanded content about our guests, and links where you can find their books like Grady's incredible book, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. We'll be right back with Mr. Hendrix on episode 146 on What Are You Afraid of?
What Are You Afraid Of?
Hi, I'm Tim Wagner, Bram Stoker award-winning author.
Hashtag Grave Girls.
This is Katrina Weidman of Destination America's Paranormal Lockdown.
This is Jim Chambers. I'm the author of The Engines of Sacrifice.
This is Jasper Barr, award-winning author of The Final Cut.
And you're listening to What Are You Afraid Of?
What Are You Afraid Of?
To What Are You Afraid Of?
What Are You Afraid Of?
Love it. Fantoxic, please. Fantoxic.
Hey, this is Lee.
And this is Michelle.
And this is Dustin from the Dead Zone. Your source for everything paranormal. Para X.
We're back. Episode 146.
We are back.
What are you afraid of? Phil, I've got great news I want to slip in.
Go ahead. What is it?
Phenom. Remember the convention that was canceled because, we suffered a plague? It's back.
Yeah. It's back. When is it coming back?
It's been scheduled for February 11th to the 13th, and we have a table waiting to go in Lancaster. So,
I'm there.
Yeah, we'll be there. So hopefully we won't suffer another plague or nuclear explosion or, vampire attack or something like that before then. And we will have our table at probably what is going to be one of the first paranormal conventions returning after our little dance with COVID reminding us that we are mortal. So Grady, great to have you on the show. Your books,
thanks for having me.
Your books look incredible. Congratulations on all the news.
So Grady, although you've written a couple of novels before it, notably Satan Loves You, Occupy Space, The Brilliant Horror Store was your breakout hit. How did that novel happen, and could you tell us about it?
Yeah, I mean, sure. So what happened with Horror Store is, this is just because I want people to get, I assume that people who want to write listen to this. And so I think they won't mind a little bit of like inside baseball. But when I went to Clarion, one of my classmates was this guy, Matt London, and his girlfriend at the time and now wife was an editor, and we all became friends, and she wound up interviewing for a job with Quirk Books down in Philly, and she didn't get the job, but the guy who was editing or was interviewing her asked, what are the kind of writers you'd bring over? Who are people who catch your eye? Who are the people out there that you think, would be great to have here? And I was one of them that she named. And so the editor got in touch with me. His name's Jason Rakulik, and asked if I had anything for him to look at. And I did. I had a novel I'd written. I had a bunch of novels I'd written. I think I had 3 or 4 novels I'd written at that point. 2 of them I'd self-published, Occupy Space, which is more of a novella, I guess, technically, and the other was Satan Loves You. But I also had one in the drawer called McMansions of the Damned, and I had another one. Gosh, what was that? I think I've reworked it into something else. I can't remember anymore. But so when I had this novel, I sent it over to him, and he hated it, but really liked the writing style. And he really liked the fact that it was sort of me trying to do a modern take on a haunted house book. And he was looking to do a haunted house thing, but sort of a reinterpretation. And so we started talking, and we're talking about big box retail stores, and sort of, that would be the place that's more haunted because, where's haunted? Well, wherever people are. And where are people? They're often shopping at a Target or a Bed Bath & Beyond. And then he brought up IKEA, and we were like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, it is a giant place full of fake bedrooms and bathrooms and kitchens that are spooky and empty. And then he had this idea to do it with the trim size of an IKEA catalog and make the cover look like an IKEA catalog. And one of the nice things about working with a small publisher like Quirk is there's a lot of back and forth with them, with the art department. Like often you have nothing to do with the design of your book at a bigger publisher. And we really got a chance to kick things around. Like he had the idea about the trim size and the cover. And then I was saying, well, what if we had, Andy Reid, the designer, was like, what if we had a piece of furniture at the front of each chapter? And I was like, well, they need catalog copy. And what if the furniture gets it turns into torture devices as the book progresses? Mm-hmm. And then Andy would be like, well, we need order forms then in the back. And so we were able to just kick it around and keep every idea that was a good idea, we just kept using. And also one of the things that was interesting about that is even though it started out as a joke, like a lot of things, when you look deeper or really dig into something, all these little fortuitous coincidences and accidents come over you, and you realize what you got a hold of, and in this case it was that IKEAs are laid out they want to do this thing called the Gruen transfer, which is sort of when you lose track, you become a little unmoored from your surroundings and a little disoriented, and that makes you more open to suggestion. It's why casinos have like patterned carpets and they keep windows far away from you and they don't have clocks. And that's why IKEA, I think it's every 6 meters. I'm not quite sure. It's been a while, but the path you're guided through the store has to take a turn to keep you sort of engaged and disoriented. The windows are very far away. There's all kinds of things. And then what they want to have happen, once you're in this Gruen transfer state, you want to have what's called information cascade, which is where you start taking your cue off the person in front of you. So I don't know if you've ever given out flyers in the street or anything, but if you have, you notice that if one person takes one, then the next 20 or 30 people will take one. But if one person doesn't take one, the next 20 or 30 people won't. And so what you want to do is get these people in this dissociated state and then have them start taking their cues off people. And the person picks up something off a shelf. You pick up something off a shelf or you take a look at it. And there's all these other kinds. I mean, of techniques and IKEAs, like they are precision designed by retail psychologists to turn these stores into machines to separate you from your money. And in horror, one of the big places in horror is the labyrinth, right? Not a maze. A maze is a game that you get through, and there's a way through it, and there's ways you go into dead ends and everything. But a labyrinth is a winding path designed to get you lost. There's the Minotaur's labyrinth. There's the sort of iconic haunted forest where people get lost, like Hansel and Gretel. There's the American wilderness, which is famously in things like Young Goodman Brown, the site of witches and the occult. There's the Overlook Hotel, which Stanley Kubrick very specifically in the film version designed to induce something like Gruen transfer with the patterned carpets and the hallways that don't quite match up. So it was a really nice bit of good luck that the joke of the haunted IKEA actually had a lot of parallels with haunted houses.
Yeah, it certainly sounded. I didn't know really all that stuff you mentioned about the IKEA being laid out like that. That's really intriguing. But it makes sense, like casinos don't have the clocks and Orsk, right?
Yes. We're definitely not IKEA. Orsk.
Yeah. Orsk is a little different. No, but
it's a cut rate IKEA.
I love it.
Let's talk about your nonfiction book. I've seen the cover several times at some of the events and some of the cons I've been to. The nonfiction book Paperbacks from Hell. Now, doing your research for that, which I'm sure you've read a lot of fiction books before you even got there, how many of those old paperback novels did you read to prepare?
Just specifically for the book, I believe, like ruling out the ones I'd read already, I think it was around 326 or so.
Yeah. And I heard it was in a very short amount of time too. You read like a gigantic amount in even a single day from what I've heard.
Yeah, no. The rumors are sadly true. I mean, Jason, my editor at Quirk, he had called me because I was writing these articles for Tor just about random paperback horror that I was picking up and was like, I think these are really funny. Why don't you pitch it as a book? And he's like, I don't think we'd buy it. He's like, but I think could be a cool book. I just don't see how it would work. And I was like, sure. So I pitched it to them and they bought it. But the problem was I was on contract to them. And I had just finished My Best Friend's Exorcism. And then the next book due on my contract was We Sold Our Souls. And so I really only had about 10 months to write this book start to finish, which gave me really 6 to 7 months of hard writing and then about 3 months to do rewrites and edits and all that stuff. And that was when I had to read all those books. And what I discovered is 3 books a day was about what I could average. Some days I do 6 books, but then I wouldn't do any the next day. So it turned out 3 books a day, 4 if I was lucky. But the trick was to read by genre. So if you're reading all the medical thrillers within the same 4-day period that you can get your hands on, you start to realize just how highly structured the medical thriller is. And so you're able to read really fast because you're like, okay, this is a scene where, this is the part of the book where someone who works in the hospital, has a change of heart and says, I'm going to tell you the secret about what's really going on. And then they set up a meeting, and then they go to the meeting, the main character does, and they get there, and the person from the inside the hospital has committed suicide or died in an accident, but is very suspicious. So, and then if you didn't see those markers appear where you knew they should appear, and you get a sense for it after the first 2 or 3, if you didn't see them appear, then you could slow down and be like, okay, something's happening here that's either very interesting or very stupid. And so that was really, that helped a lot. But it was also a lot of blind luck. I mean, I'd grab books because the covers looked cool, or I'd heard rumors about something about it, or sometimes just completely randomly. I mean, I remember when I read When Darkness Loves Us by Elizabeth Engstrom, which is a fantastic book, I think the 20 or so books I'd read before that were just dire garbage. And so, and so then you have this thing, well, am I overrating this book? And no, it's a really good book, but it's like, you feel like you've just crossed a desert and have found water, because you're like, oh my God, it's a book I actually am reading. I'm not just surviving this book. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, 3-4 books a day. I mean, it's tough to just survive 3-4 books a day without enjoying it. I mean, so what was your wake up at what, like 7 and just go all day, or is that what you had to do?
I mean, yeah, my wife's a chef, and so she goes into work around 9 in the morning and usually gets home between like midnight and 1. And so, I'd be at work basically by between 9 and 10, and I'd have 12, 13, 14 hours to go. And, she wasn't real impressed. She'd leave the house in the morning and I'd be on the couch with a pile of paperbacks next to me. And, she'd come home at night with like burns and cuts and all this stuff. And I'd be sitting there in the same position. I don't think it made me attractive.
with a glass of whiskey or something, right? Like,
No,
how was your day?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the funny thing is I couldn't really drink when I was doing this because what would happen is one drink for me turns into 3 drinks. Right. And then it's like, oh, crap, what am I reading? So I had to like stay totally focused. Although I do confess, beer was a very, very good way to sort of like free myself from my suffering afterwards.
I can completely imagine. So I recently finished reading the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which received glowing reviews from Publishers Weekly, Kirkus Reviews, Booklist, Paul Tremblay, among many, many others. The novel is just incredible, and I was happy to see it took place in the same universe as My Best Friend's Exorcism, which is also one of my favorite books of all time, actually. Could you tell us about... you're welcome. Could you tell us about the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires and the creation of these fantastic characters and the mysterious stranger who infiltrates their lives?
Sure. I mean, the thing with this book was that... My Best Friend's Exorcism was really about high school friendship, and I wanted to write about adult friendship, and sort of because it's a very different thing. And sort of central to that is my mom's been in a book club for, I think, 41 years by now. And I really hated them when I was a kid because it was just a bunch of my friends' moms and loud women who came to our house, and like I couldn't go downstairs when they were meeting, and they'd have cake and stuff, and I wasn't allowed to eat it when it was in the fridge, and I just didn't think highly of them. I was a kid, you hate adults. And as I've gotten to know a lot of them as an adult and as actual human beings, and not just my old math tutor or so and so who drove carpool, I realized that they really, their lives were very different for them than they looked from the outside to me. And that these women who I thought I had pegged as these kind of like silly housewives in a book club had really gone through a lot. I mean, like everyone, they'd gone through a lot. They had really rich, interesting lives. And I wanted to write a book that sort of took readers on that same trip that I did, going from feeling like you've got these women's numbers and you're not impressed by them to realizing that they're a lot tougher and a lot different than you think they are. And so it's about a book club in a small southern town, Charleston, where I grew up, or more specifically Mount Pleasant, which is a suburb of Charleston, in the early 90s. And basically they're all, except for one of them, Mary Ellen, they're all housewives. And they're all married, and they've been in this book club for a while, and a guy moves to town, James Harris, and one of the women feels very strongly that he may be a serial killer and or a vampire. I don't think I'm spoiling anything because it's right there in the title. And I also wanted to write about this kind of iconic American archetype, this kind of cowboy figure we have, this guy in denim who's really sexy and rugged, and no one knows where he comes from, and he comes into town and everyone swoons for them, and he turns everything upside down like Shane or something, and then he takes off and you don't know where. And that archetype was deployed to really great effect by Robert James Waller in The Bridges of Madison County. But that archetype, if you just follow it far enough, is Ted Bundy or Henry Lee Lucas. I mean, it's the serial killer, which is also kind of an American mythic figure. And so I wanted to take this vampire and sort of knock the dust off them, because ultimately vampires are predators and predators are serial killers. And on the one hand, I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and that there was that late 80s, early 90s serial killer chic thing going on that I regret to say I was as much a part of as anyone else. But when you think about it, like, serial killers are very bleak, very empty people. And I wanted to sort of address that a little bit for myself. So,
yeah, and I found Patricia to be a wonderful character, and it's my mother's name, so I can relate very very easily with that. And you even say in the introduction, you say how these women, we all know them. They go throughout their lives, their everyday lives, and sometimes they just need something more. And there are mothers, there are wives, there are grandmothers. They're born, they go through their life and they're programmed, and they just need something in their lives to kind of shake things up. And I think that's what you portrayed very well in the novel. Oh,
thanks. Well, and that's a push me, pull you thing, right? Like, one of the reasons I wrote this book set in the neighborhood I grew up in around the time I grew up is, A, I know it really well, so I'm able to write about it in a way I feel comfortable with. But B, there is this nostalgia, right, for that kind of safety. But at the time when I was there, all I wanted to do was get out. I wanted to burn it all down. I was like, I wanted adventure and excitement and danger. And now I find that I miss the safety and comfort and familiarity. So I think there's always that push and pull on people that, the trite way of saying is the grass is always greener. But I think it's a really strong urge with people that can be really destructive sometimes, that you crave danger when you have safety, and you crave safety when you have danger, and you're never happy with the one you have when you have it.
Yeah, it's a duality. And the grass is always greener, and that nostalgia. I had that nostalgia too, because I grew up in the 80s, and I think once in a while about that time period. I'm like, man, I wish I could go back.
Right. But at the
that
time,
safety net, the safety net.
But at the time, I remember being really bored and feeling stifled by it, and being really scared a lot. I found high school a very scary place. It was like, am I doing this right? Am I ruining my entire future? Are we all going to die in a nuclear war? Like, it was stressful.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. I felt the same way when you're actually going through. When I was going through it too, I was, I hated it. It was like, man, I want to get out. I just want to get out. And now I'm like, I want to go back. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful way of portraying it. That what you did.
We are talking to Grady Hendrix on episode 146. Grady Hendrix is a vampire, and What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. Again, we're on Paradox Radio Friday nights at 9 p.m. Check out our website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. We'll be right back with Grady on this excellent episode. I know Phil is just having an incredible time over there. And Phil, I wish that I could share some of that gumbo with you. We were talking.
Yeah. Make some and we'll share it.
Yes, make some, because I just want to let our fans know I got a bunch of requests for the gumbo and the bread pudding. It took me a year studying the New Orleans methods, and it's all in the roux. Let me tell you that you really have to master that roux, and it's it's a dangerous thing to work with because it's fat and it's flour, and you can burn that. But I put up the recipe at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com, and it's amazing how many hits and copies it's gotten, and how many notes that I've gotten on that. So I wish I could have shared that with you guys. I really do.
Fox, box it up and send me some. Ship it.
Because I used to always cook, and then I would send some home for you and your mom.
Yes.
I miss doing that.
Box up and ship it.
But we'll be right back with Grady Hendrix on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. This is episode 146. Grady Hendrix is a vampire.
Where are you going?
I'm going back to the paranormal view, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Rhett, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlett?
No!
Well, that's your misfortune.
Red, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear... Line!
You gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Para X Radio Network.
We're back. Episode 146, Grady Hendrix is a Vampire. And we've been recording a bunch of these this summer. We've spoken to some incredible authors, like we just spoke to Scott Kenmore. Daniel Kraus is going to be on. We're going to be talking to him at the end of June. And, of course, we've had the St. Croix Paranormal Investigation Group come on. And some wonderful guests are lined up for the future as we sort of move into Halloween. We're getting these done early because we have the time. We're all pretty much sitting at home at this point, so it's been great talking to these wonderful people. So we're speaking to Grady Hendrix, and it's really cool talking to him. And one of the things we do on the show, we talk about horror, we talk about movie making, but we also provide advice and wisdom to new authors and authors currently writing, and people can come on, listen to the author episodes of the show, and hear the wisdom from some rather established people who've been very successful in what can be a rather difficult field, especially as competition's increasing and the market share is definitely beginning to dwindle a bit. So, Grady, all of your books seem like they would translate perfectly to the screen, and you just made an exciting announcement about one of them. What's the news?
Oh, so Horror Store, which is the one about the haunted IKEA, it's been picked up by New Republic Pictures, who are the folks who produced 1917, and we're going to do it as a feature film, and I'm going to be writing the script. So that is really nice. I'm a big supporter of Don Winslow, who's been talking about, ways that Hollywood can work better with book authors. And I feel like, it's not everyone's cup of tea, and I didn't think it was mine at first, but I really am psyched to have a chance to sort of try to crack my own book for a different medium, just because no one's thought about this story and its strengths and weaknesses more than I have. And so I feel like if anyone's going to pull this off, it's going to be me. And if anyone's going to screw it up, it's going to be me too.
You remember, Phil, when they when Through Line Films asked me if I wanted to write the script for Street Martyr? And yeah. I said no. I said no. I said I've spent most of my life studying the art of fiction in the written narrative, and I just have no idea what to do to write the visual medium. That's actually more your field, Phil. And
they're different.
Yeah,
there is an extreme difference.
And yeah. I said I want this to go well and to be done right. So please go and get somebody who's written film and do this for me. So I just got.
And I've said this to people many times. Like, one of the biggest, I mean, it's not the only, obviously, but one of the biggest things is a novel traditionally is written in the past tense. A screenplay is written in the present.
Right. With a concept of time that's different where you've got all the time. And it's also, you write internalizations into the book, but you can't really do that on film, which is another. So I just said, you know what, guys, go ahead and do this for me. So so Grady, congratulations on your courage, my friend.
Oh, thanks.
I appreciate that.
You know, I mean, at the end of the day, the job's the same day, which is the hardest part is getting out of your own way. You know what I mean? Like, rather than writing what you think is cool, you have to write something that people are going to want to watch or read, and that's hard.
I think that's the best thing he said is get out of your own way. I like that a lot.
I've noticed an interesting pattern in your writing. Most of your protagonists are female, even in your movie Satanic Panic, and it's absolutely wonderful how you write them. Is there a specific reason for that creative choice?
You know, I wasn't even aware of it until Southern Book Club when people started asking me about it. And there's been, and actually it was pretty conscious with We Sold Our Souls, the heavy metal book. Because that was a book I was having a lot of trouble with getting started. And it was going to be, I had just done my best friend's exorcism. And that was like a very female focused book. And I was like, this is going to be my dude book. And it's going to be about these guys, you know, like me who hit middle age. And you're like, do I keep going? Do I stop? And there's people I really have a lot of admiration for, guys I know who just, they keep going, even with all evidence to the contrary. They keep playing in their band. They keep working on their novel. They keep making their endless movie. And like, I really admire that. They are the one who's going to say quit. The world is not going to tell them to quit. They will decide when to quit, and it'll be on their terms. But I look at a lot of the stuff they wrestle with and a lot of the flack they get. And so I wanted this to be about that. And I wanted it to be my book about male anger, like how that anger that I certainly feel a lot of times in my life, and that I think a lot of guys sometimes feel, is like it can be very destructive, but it can also be very, it can be the fuel that sort of gets you through tough times. And the book just was not taking off. And my wife and I went to an election party in November 2016 at a friend's house who, they were all in for Hillary Clinton, and, you know, we voted for Clinton too. And, but they had like done canvassing and canvassed with their kids and were really, really all in. And so my wife, I picked her up. She got off early from work that night, and we got to their house around 9:20 or 9:30, around the time the Florida results were coming in. And it was like the most stereotyped version of the bougiest party you've ever seen gone wrong. It was like there was the plate of like charcuterie that was like curdling untouched. They were like the cheese board was turning hard. One of the hosts was so depressed he was just on his phone refreshing the news and not talking to anyone. The other one had locked herself in the bathroom and was crying. Other people were just like staring at the TV and trying to make small talk, and we sort of like edged out of there, you know, after like 20 minutes. We're like, oh, let me just go check something in the hall. And then we just didn't come back. But as we were going on the elevator on the way down to the lobby, Chris, 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 my main character, became Chris, Kris, a woman, because I realized that if I wanted a character who was told that they didn't matter, who the whole world was telling them you are worthless and have no value and anything you say or do doesn't count, then in the wake of that, then it had to be a woman. It would not be as convincing as a man. It would be so much more powerful as a woman, because I feel like a lot of women felt like that was the message they got. Whatever your politics are, I know a lot of women who felt like that's what they got told, that, you know, that election was a referendum that they didn't matter. And a lot of them, you know, got really involved politically after that and really found their voices. But that was immediate. And once I made that decision, the book just snapped into focus for me. But I think, just not to go on too long, but I think one of the things that really helps me is I need to be writing main characters who I have a little distance from, because if it's a dude, it's just going to be me. It's just going to be a really good looking, you know, guy who's super sexy to everyone. And that's going to get old. And if it's someone different than me, if it's a woman, especially, I can sort of stand back and look at them as a whole person rather than just some reflection of myself. So I think that's kind of one reason I'm really drawn to writing female characters, is it gives me the distance I need to write about the character. rather than to try to be writing about myself through like a proxy.
To let our Para X audience know, we only get 58 minutes on Para X Radio, and we usually do extended episodes, which you can find at our website at www.whatdoyoufraidofpodcast.com. And of course, they're on all major podcast services. Pretty much, I think I've missed one or two that I'm getting on, but you can pretty much find us everywhere, or find a subscription at our website, www.whatdoyoufraidofpodcast.com. Now, we're going to pause to play an excerpt from the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Let me just read the little blurb here. Fried green tomatoes and steel magnolias meet Dracula in this southern-flavored supernatural thriller set in the 90s about a women's book club that must protect its suburban community from a mysterious and handsome stranger who turns out to be a blood-sucking fiend. This is David Walton reading from the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires on What Are You Afraid Of, episode 146, Grady Hendrix is a Vampire, and we'll be right back with Mr. Grady.
The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Read by David Walton with special permission by Blackstone Publishing. All rights remain. Patricia went down the shaky front steps with a silver Boy Scout flashlight in one hand. Mrs. Green stood in the doorway. "I'm just going to look around the back of the trailers," Patricia said. But Mrs. Green had already closed and locked the front door. Patricia heard her slide the chain into place. All over 6 Mile, she heard the hum of air conditioners. The woods around her were a tornado of screaming insects. Every breath felt like it came through a towel soaked in warm water. She made her legs move, taking her around the dark corners of the trailer. She clicked on the flashlight and played it over the big wooden spool, as if she might see an incriminating footprint outlined in black ink on its top. She shined her light down on the sandy soil and saw indentations and shadows and lumps, but didn't know what any of them meant. She straightened and shined her light at the woods. The pale yellow beam played over pine trees. They were spaced pretty far apart, and she realized she could walk along the edge of them and still keep an eye on the trailer. Before she could think better of it, she stepped around the first one, then the second, the flashlight beaming a lamplight circle on the ground in front of her, leading her into the woods step by step, as the screaming insects closed in around her. Something grabbed her foot and yanked, and her heart flooded with cold water before she saw that she'd snagged it on a rusty wire stretched along the ground. She looked back behind her, feeling confident, but the lit windows of the houses were further away than she'd expected. She wondered if the police had arrived, but knew she'd see their blue lights if they had. The smell of warm sap surrounded her, and pine needles were thick underfoot. She knew this was the last moment when she could turn back. If she kept walking forward, she wouldn't be able to see the lit windows at all anymore, and then she was going to be out here alone with James Harris. "Hang on, Destiny," she thought, as she started walking deeper into the woods. "I'm coming." With the flashlight beam bouncing before her, she concentrated on each tree trunk, not the entire dark mass of them crowding around and behind her. She went carefully, not wanting to step in a hole, conscious of the loud crashing sounds her body made as she brushed through the branches, bushes, and vines. Something that wasn't her rustled to the right. She froze and clicked off her flashlight so it wouldn't give her away. The night rushed in around her. She strained to listen over the sound of blood throbbing in her ears. Her pulse thumped in her wrists. Her breath rasped in her nose. Then she realized the insects had stopped screaming. Blobs of dark colour flashed across her vision. She heard something scurry through the trees, and suddenly the thought of standing still panicked her, and she needed to move. But without the flashlight she couldn't see her way forward, so she clicked it back on, and the trees and pine needles on the ground materialised in front of her again. She moved fast, flashlight pointed down, looking for a little girl's leg clad in denim sticking out from behind a pine tree. Mixed in with the sound of her breath and her heartbeat and her pulse, she heard things groaning in the trees all around her. Any minute a big hand would settle on the back of her neck. Her pounding heart pulled her forward. She should turn around and go home. She was nothing but a tiny speck in the forest. She was a fool to think she'd somehow stumble across Destiny Taylor this way. And what was she going to say when she saw James Harris? Was she going to knock him over the head with a little flashlight? She needed to go back. Then the trees stopped, and she stepped onto a dirt road. It wasn't very wide, but the sandy soil was loose, and she realised someone must be building something nearby because of the big tread marks pressed into its surface. She flashed the light in one direction and saw the little road disappearing into a dark tunnel of trees. She flashed the light in the other direction and saw the chrome grille of James Harris's white van. She snapped off her light and stepped back into the pines, stumbling over a stump. He could have seen her. She'd snapped her light off in time, but she realised that he could have seen her beam bobbing through the trees as she approached, and then she'd stood there like a dummy looking the other way before shining her light at the van. She wanted to run, but made herself hold still instead. The van didn't move. It wasn't 50 feet away. She could walk over and touch it. She needed to walk over and touch it. She needed to know if he was inside. She walked towards it, her shoes sinking into the sand, making no sound, her stomach churning. She waited for the headlights to scream on and pin her down, the engine to roar to life and run her over. The van's grille and windshield swam from side to side in her vision, bouncing up and down, getting closer, and then she was there. She realised that inside was darker than outside, so she ducked down, knees popping, to make sure he didn't see her head outlined through his windshield against the night sky. She put out one hand to steady herself. The curve of the hood felt cool. She wondered if the police were at Wanda's trailer yet. She wanted to go back. Didn't drug dealers have guns and knives and all kinds of weapons? She imagined Blue in the back of the van and knew she had to look. Destiny Taylor wasn't her child, but she was still a child. Patricia slowly rose, knees cracking, and leaned forward until the edges of her hands touched the cold windshield, and she cupped them around her eyes and peered inside. Beyond the thin crescent rim of the steering wheel, it was pitch dark. She narrowed her eyes until the muscles in them ached, but she couldn't see a thing. Then she realised he wasn't in the van. He was still in the woods with Destiny, or he'd finished with her and was on his way back. Before he got there, she could look inside quickly and see if there were any clues, any clothes from that other child, anything that belonged to Francine. She had seconds. To listen to the entire book, please check out the unabridged audio edition narrated by Barney Turpin.
We're back. David Walton always does such a wonderful reading artwork. I met him on Second Life, actually, when I was hanging out and doing charity events for National Cancer Society and things like that. And so it's just really great that David can read the work. And he's been with us for the last 5 years reading our ghost stories, our fiction excerpts, and things like that. And we just so glad to have him. We are back on episode 146, Grady Hendrix is a Vampire, where Phil wrote this incredible interview, and we're learning quite a bit from Mr. Hendrix, and it's just thrilling to hear about his movie projects and his television shows and all the wonderful books coming up. And he's got such an enthusiasm for his work, and it's really something I need to nurture back, is to bring back in that enthusiasm that I used to have.
Oh, thanks. It's probably just the drinking. Now, I assume that now that we're on the extended part, this is where we give the real answers and the real truth behind, the world.
Yeah, we've messed with our Para X audience, and now we can actually, the kids have gone to bed, and we can hang out.
Now we can speak Illuminati member to Illuminati member.
Wait,
that's right.
You're an Illuminati member too? Oh,
aren't we all?
Yeah, wink, wink.
This is the real interview now.
Yes, the real interview.
So, speaking of film projects, Grady, you wrote a screenplay. You wrote the screenplay for Satanic Panic, which stars Rebecca Romaine and Jerry O'Connell. Could you tell us about the film and how you got involved with the project?
Sure. I mean, the basic the elevator pitch, I guess you'd say, is that it's about a pizza delivery woman who has to do a last minute delivery to sort of a gated 1%er community. And they all turn out to be Satanists who are summoning their dark god. And, you get hungry when that happens. Those are very long rituals. And so they've ordered pizza. And when she arrives, they've lost their virgin for their virgin sacrifice. And it turns out she's a virgin. So it's sort of Pizza Girl versus Satanist, one of those one long night kind of movies. And I got involved with it because I knew Ted Gagin. He had directed a movie called We're Still Here, and we've been friends for a really long time. And he was looking for another project, and he had pitched a bunch of projects to his producers because We're Still Here did really well for them. And the one they wanted him to do wasn't one he was really enthused about. And I happened to be working on a screenplay about a pizza dude who has the same kind of thing happen to him. And I was like, well, this would actually, I was just doing my screenplay for fun. And I was like, well, this would actually, I took him out for a drink, got him a little liquored up, and pointed out that actually my script would solve a lot of problems for him if we just gender swap the lead. And he agreed, so we did. And we'd written it, and they were excited about it and made a trade announcement that they were producing it. And then something came up with the financing, and Ted had pitched them a horror movie set during the War of 1812. And they were like, let's do that one instead. And you've got 6 weeks before we need a script ready to roll for pre-production. And he had really only given them a 1-paragraph pitch. And fortunately, I happen to be a big War of 1812 enthusiast. So we dove into that and did that instead. And then once I got finished, I realized no one had ever signed a contract with us for Satanic Panic. So we took it over to the folks at Fangoria who produced it.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful film. I loved it. It had, as soon as I started, me and my buddy Matt, we rented it and we watched it maybe about 9 months ago, before all this pandemic stuff started, and we could still have people over, And we're both a fan of yours, him as well. And
oh, thanks.
So we started watching the movie, and about 10 minutes in, we both were like, "This is totally Grady Hendrix. You can totally tell." So
no, and that's so weird to me because it's like I don't see it, but I'm glad whatever it is entertains people.
Yeah, we could totally see. Yeah, and that's another thing. You have a certain way of writing. It's very unique, and as soon as you start reading your stuff, or in the case of that movie, you can tell that it's you, and that's a very good thing.
Oh, thanks.
And so it seems that you jumped into the podcast business, and I'm so sorry. Welcome to the business of diminishing returns. That's just 5 years of sarcasm coming in as we've been doing. Like Phil and I, we started this. I asked him about it. This was just supposed to be a 4-episode miniseries for Halloween. And when I was researching it, that's when I realized that you can only build an audience through devotion, through a long, grueling period of time, and eventually people start subscribing more and more to you. And we've been doing this for 5 years now. Certainly not a mini-series, and this is episode 146. Now, you've jumped into the podcast business. You started Super Scary Haunted Homeschool. So, what's this show about, and what can we look forward to?
Well, I feel like such an amateur because you guys are on episode what?
146.
146.
Yeah, I mean, good God, that the amount of work it takes and how not even the recording and the editing are sort of the easy parts. Maybe my sloppy technical standards are accounting for that, but I find the research and sort of like, that part of it so intense. But I started, years ago, I made a decision to stop doing sort of traditional book events to promote my books, like where you go and you read from the book and you do a Q&A. They just bored my tits off. And I felt like they kind of bored the audience too. And I started doing these like one-person shows starting with my best friend's exorcism, but I didn't really figure them out until I started doing Paperbacks from Hell. And that's a full-on hour-long show. I mean, there's something like in the 60 minutes, I go through 240 slides. I sing a couple of songs. It's just really ridiculous. And I really have enjoyed doing it, especially at places that understand that if the audience can drink, everything's a lot more fun for everyone. And then I did a show about heavy metal and horror for We Sold Our Souls. It was really fun to do. And I was all geared up to do a show for Southern Book Club. And COVID-19 happened and my entire book tour got canceled. And so I had all this material and I thought, well, let me try it as a podcast and see how that goes. And it's been really fun. So I'm doing basically, it's going to be about 10 episodes before I kind of have to take a break to write a couple of books. And then when the next book's ready, I'll do another 10 episodes. But it's so it's sort of a little bit counterproductive because, like you said, it's all about building that long-term audience. But it's each episode is about some aspect of vampires, and we're sort of starting at the beginning and moving forward. So the first one was about sort of the first quote unquote real vampires, the first incidents of what people thought were real vampirism and what happened with those and how vampires were sort of a metaphor for plagues or often went hand in hand. And then there was an episode about sort of the history of vampires and how that image of them got shaped up. The episode I just dropped are these Saturday school episodes I do, which are kind of shorter ones that are more focused on something tight. So the first one of those was about Chinese hopping vampires. And the second one of those was about the two most ancient vampires, which are Lilith, who is Adam's first wife, Adam and Eve, and then Lamia, who's the ancient Greek monster lady. And then I think on Friday or Saturday of this week, the next full big episode is going to be up, which is all about the two big, sort of the king and queen of the prom, 19th century vampire prom, which are Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla and Bram Stoker's Dracula, which are really interesting, weird books.
And like I said, when I'm on your Twitter, and that's how I actually found out about it. And I saw that you had this podcast, and so I sat down and I started listening to episode 1, and right away I was like, nice. He started have you ever thought about Dracula's penis? Let's talk about Dracula's
Not enough
penis.
people have.
Phil was like, very excited about this.
I thought it was so funny. I loved it. Yeah.
He texted me.
Yeah, well,
all excited.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dracula's penis. He was just really excited about it. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just feel like, John Shirley really did a lot of thinking about Dracula's penis, and I feel like that's been forgotten. And I feel like those are the kind of efforts that we need to preserve in history.
Absolutely.
We're talking to Grady Hendrix on episode 146 of What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show. We're on Pararex Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Check out our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com for this episode and pages for every other episode. The dead demand to be heard, and on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show, Philadelphia's horror home, we listen.
New true ghost stories every episode, interviews with paranormal investigators. There is no supernatural.
The natural world is just far greater than we can perceive. More information and expanded content at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com.
And follow us on Twitter at PFWhatAfraidOf. Find us on all major podcast services, including iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, iHeartRadio, or listen to us Fridays at 9 p.m. on the Para X Radio Network.
I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
So what are you afraid of?
If you like what you hear, leave us a review on your preferred podcast service.
What are you afraid of? Horror and paranormal shows.
Speak to the dead.
Para X.
So right now, we're going to play something called Guess Who Said It? And I'm going to pause real quick for permission from Grady off the record. So this is off the record.
Off the record.
So, yeah. So we're going to, it's a game that I came up with. So if you want to play, we can continue with it. If not, then we won't. Basically what it is I have a stack of your books right here, okay, next to me. And I'll randomly read a line of dialogue from one of them, actually a couple of them, not all at once. And then you name which character said it and from which of your books.
Oh, man. Okay. That's assuming I remember their character names. But yeah, I'll give it a shot. Okay.
And this is off the record again. If you don't get it, I'll tell you off the record, and you can just do it on record.
Oh, Phil.
No. I don't mind getting it wrong. That's fine.
Okay. You don't mind? Okay.
Oh, no, Phil, give it to him. Give it to him hard. No, don't.
Okay.
Don't let him do that. Okay.
Okay. We won't do that then.
Okay.
All right?
Good.
Okay. So I'm going to take a random book here, and I'm going to read the line. This is the one time in your life you are face to face with something bigger than yourself. He said, I'm a mystery of the universe. Is this really how you're going to respond?
Oh, James Harris in Southern Book Club.
You got it.
Ding, 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 ding.
Ding, ding. That is
I don't know why
correct.
I'm so proud.
That is absolutely correct. Okay, I'm going to take another book here of yours. I don't know what's going on, blank said, but there's new graffiti in the bathroom, and I swear it wasn't there 20 minutes ago.
Oh, Amy and Horror Store.
You got it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Okay, wow, all right. I know my own book. Do I get a prize? Is there a prize?
Absolutely. Phil and Fox are going to come visit you in New York and hang out with you. That's your prize.
That is not a prize.
For y'all.
That's not what.
Lloyd,
that is not a prize you want.
Lloyd Kaufman invited us up that one time to come hang out in a Troma.
Oh, wow.
We should go do that.
I feel like the chance to hang out with Lloyd would be insane.
Oh,
I actually shot a movie with Lloyd, so I've spent the whole day with him. We picked him up from the train station in Philly, and he spent. We actually shot in my house, in my kitchen, and he was in my kitchen pretty much all day.
That was fun. Yeah, we did an episode of What Are You Afraid of with him too, and we'll put up.
And we did, yeah.
Yeah, put up that link for you.
So here's another one. It'll be dangerous in there for an unbaptized soul, blank said. I'll be doing some serious blasting of prayer, and if you're not girded with the full armor of God, you might not make it through with your soul intact.
Oh, Brother Lemon in My Best Friend's Exorcism.
You got it. All right. I think Grady knows his own books. Yes.
I really liked it when you said blank said. I'm like, that was really.
Well, I had to say it.
Yeah.
I actually like the long pause between me giving the answer and you telling me if I got it right or not, because I get very sweaty.
Me, sir. We couldn't afford to hire a lawyer and keep the lights on. But I've got a whole shelf of John Grisham novels, and I've already finished 4 of them. I think I can do this.
Holy cow, that's Nero and Satan Loves You.
You got it.
And remember, kids,
man,
Satan loves you.
Exactly. He does. Or she does. They do. But it's so weird because I really, when I finish a book, like when I finish writing a book, it's done for me. Like I don't go back and I reread them. I don't do any of that stuff. And in fact, when you guys asked about an excerpt for this show, I was like, oh, you just pick one, because I really didn't want to go back and look at it again. And on the one hand, it really helps me to sort of do that way. And it's weird because I get different versions of the book mixed up in my head. Like there's so many different versions of Southern Book Club. I can't exactly remember what is in and what got cut from the version that people are reading. But on the other hand, it makes them feel like I've sent my kids to college and they occasionally let me know how they're doing. And it's kind of the relationship I want with the book once I'm out of it. So I was kind of worried I wouldn't know any of these answers. And I'm very pleased with myself that I did. I'm feeling a little smug right now.
Fantastic.
Correct.
Phil, what you should have done was thrown in something from a book that he didn't write. And see if he could catch it and see if he's like...
I would have sat here like a dog trying to figure out television, just like...
That's wonderful. Phil, I think we're going to have to make this a game on every episode when we ask an author, to interview. So get ready to do this again.
Let's do it.
That's wonderful. That was a lot of fun.
This is the first time we've ever done that.
Jesus, I'm a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it made it easy because I have all your books. So I was like, why not,
Definitely do that. Tell Daniel I said hi, and definitely do that with him. Make sure you get an excerpt from Rotters, which is a book of his I really love.
Well, but we're getting to the part of the show. We've covered the horror part. Now we're moving on to the paranormal part. And I asked you, because we always put a ghost story in every episode, and I like to have it when the guests tell us a ghost story. And I asked you, have you ever had a paranormal experience? You said, and I quote, see if you can recognize this quote, "I'm in the same category as most people and have definitely had an encounter that I saw at the time as a ghost. But I also worked at Psychical Research nonprofit for about 5 years, so my relationship with the material is complicated anyways." So, can you tell us about any experiences that you may have had with a ghost?
Sure.
And what did you do with this nonprofit, and how did it complicate your relationship with the material?
Well, sure. So, the fact, for me at least, actual ghost stories are very mundane, right? You see someone walk across a room, someone's there, you don't expect to be there. They just don't work as horror movies. And so for me, it was when I was a kid, we were out on Isle of Palms, which is sort of, there are these two islands right off where I grew up. Just over a bridge, but they're where the beaches are. And a lot of people, I have relatives who live out there year round. And we were playing tag, a really complicated and involved game of tag at night. And as you do, and houses on the beach there, they're all up on stilts, and usually have sort of like giant glorified garages underneath them, or junk rooms that are open. And we were playing this game, and I was running, and I was coming from the beach side of the house. I was under the house, coming from the beach side of the house towards the doorway, this trellis doorway that led down this hall that had, I think, like a shed kind of utility room on the left, and on the right it had the shower where you'd shower off after you were on the beach, and then it lits out onto the street, or the driveway in the street, which had a street light there. As I ran towards this door, this is probably 10 o'clock at night, this dude, big guy, unbelievably big guy, was standing silhouetted in the trellis door, and I was about to go through it. And I put on the brakes so hard and went down on my ass. And my cousin and a friend who were chasing behind saw him, and we all freaked out and, went back the other direction. And then when we looked back, he was gone. And so we looked, looking for footprints and all that. And it was pretty terrifying. And what I realize now as an adult is it had a lot to do with running and being jacked up on adrenaline, and the angle the light was hitting this trellis and all that. And the fact that we all saw it probably had something to do with suggestion, or just that it was a pretty convincing optical illusion. But in the moment, I experienced, and we all experienced, is this incredibly dangerous thing that didn't have any right to be there, and did not seem to be there later. So to us, it was all this supernatural moment, and it was really simultaneously upsetting, and really felt like it shook the grounds of a lot of our stable view of the world, and kind of exhilarating to feel like we'd touch something that was so out of the regular world. And so later I answered, when I was in come back from Hong Kong. So it must have been 98 or so. I had moved back to New York, and I answered an ad on Craigslist for an office manager for a nonprofit. And the nonprofit turned out to be a place called the American Society for Psychical Research, which is a nonprofit dedicated to investigating claims of aspects of parapsychology. They've been around since, I think they were founded in 1885 by William James and a bunch of dudes. And so at the time, they were doing a lot of off-site stuff and a lot of internal reorganization and a lot of fundraising. So I was the schmo who answered the phone and ran the office and, took care of memberships and fulfilled subscriptions and copied articles. I mean, really mundane office stuff. But I was in this, pretty amazing brownstone they had, usually alone or with, one other person on another floor in the offices. And they had this incredible library and archive that I spent a lot of time in. And my boss was really, really smart and one of the smartest people I've ever worked for. And she said, people are going to call because we were listed in all the telephone books, because at the time it was telephone books. And she said, and they're going to tell you a lot of stuff, a lot of stories that have happened to them, a lot of events. And don't validate them because, they might be fooling with you. They might be high. They might be mentally ill. They might just be fabricating. At the same time, don't invalidate them because what do you know? You're the office manager. Maybe there is life after death. You have no idea. So you couldn't validate them. You couldn't invalidate them. And so I spent like 4 or 5 years really just listening to people and reading a lot of accounts of people's encounters with what they regarded as supernatural things, supernatural encounters in the archives. And it was just really interesting for me to see what a human experience this was and how profound it was for people, and also how similar these experiences were for people. And just, it was a really changed my life. And one of the really tough things for me is that I'd been out of that job for a while when I wrote Horror Store, but my first draft of Horror Store, my real experience with ghosts and apparitions was that they were relatively benign. I mean, they had a profound emotional impact on people who saw them, and a profound psychological impact, but they weren't like screaming, get out, and making blood drip out of people's walls and attacking people. And so I turned in this draft, and my editor, Jason, was like, dude, these ghosts are just not very interesting. They're not doing anything. And I was like, right. Fictional ghosts and non-fictional ghosts, very different things. Right. And so it really, it was one of those things where I really had to sort of partition off those two aspects of stuff I knew. There's ghosts that are dramatic and in fiction, and then there's the ones that people seem to encounter or feel like they encounter in their everyday lives.
And that's something that when I'm collecting ghost stories for the show, and like I said, the show's a constant ravenous mouth, I have to tell people, don't worry about writing this in a dramatic way. There's no beginning, middle, or end. Usually a ghost appears, something weird happens, it has very little context. It's not like the Amityville Horror. Just tell us what happened and don't worry about, like I said, beginning, middle, and end. So
yeah, no, that's a really great way to sum it up. I mean, it is, like you said, they happen, they're random, something unusual happens, and then they're over, and you're just left to sort of handle it.
And when I'm hearing ghost stories, and we don't really determine what's true and what's false. We don't examine them. Like I always say, Phil and I are parajournalists. We just report what we hear and enjoy the story from the context of fun. But when I'm listening to ghost stories, or especially reading them, and I'm thinking about interviewing the authors, the ones that start small, build into a plot, have a beginning, middle, and then a climax, I'm like, this has been dramatized. There's a lot of fiction in this, and I sort of put it away because I know that ghost stories legitimately in folklore and folk culture don't happen like that. So you can always tell if a book is... It's weird, like an extreme event will happen, and then there'll be a couple of dissipating events, and then maybe one sighting, a couple of weird things, and then it'll just stop. There's no build-up. So
yeah. Well, and also I feel like, and this is one thing I keep trying to work towards in the stuff I do, the books and the movies and things, is if you're going to take ghosts seriously, one thing that's always been interesting to me is that time seems to function differently. And, there was an account I read from the 30s, I think, 1920s at the ASPR, where a woman's encounter with what she felt was the spirit of her son kind of unfolded over 15 years. And then you read, some of these accounts people have of time slippages where they'll report an apparition and someone on that same location, but in the past will report a similar apparition almost as if they've seen each other across time. Or you'll see one of the things that was really interesting was this cross correspondence, the Lenora Piper cross correspondence, which was a series of mediumistic sittings, but they were taking place between a sitter in England, a sitter in Boston, and a sitter in Bombay. And they seem to sometimes happen in reverse order, where someone would finish a sentence at a sitting before someone else had begun it. And I've always thought that it's a really interesting thing to fictionalize, is how time would move differently. You know what I mean? If you were a disembodied spirit, and how to use something that might seem very brief might take a human observer several years to put together the pieces of, or time might seem almost like that Dr. Manhattan effect, where 5 decades of time would almost seem simultaneous. And so I've always thought that would be something really interesting to explore. But usually when I try to do it in a book or a movie, people are like, I don't even understand what you're saying here, man. Just stop. Can someone just die?
Like Dr. Manhattan always said, I experience time differently than you.
Yeah.
And I love the miniseries, or the series on HBO. The Watchmen series is one of the best things I've seen, and very prophetic, actually.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because one of the things I'm dealing with a project right now with an immortal character, and one of the things that's really interesting is we all have this experience that, oh man, when I was like 10 years old, an hour seemed like forever. It just seemed to go on. And we remember these endless summer days where they never seem to end. And now we feel like, oh my God, it's Friday again. What the hell? And there's a really good biological reason for that, which is that when you're 10 years old, an hour is a much greater proportion of your life than it is when you're 40 years old, right? Like a year when you're 40 is a small.
You snap your fingers. You snap your fingers and it's over. Yeah, a year when you're a kid is like 10 years.
When you're 10 years old, a year is 10% of your life. When you're 40 years old, a year is less than 0.25% of your life, something like that. I'm not that good at math, but so time. There are perception of time. So what does that mean if you're like 1,000 years old? Like, how are you experiencing the flow of time? How are you remembering things and keeping memories stable in your head? I can't tell you the amount of stuff I've forgotten from 10 years ago. So it's just been really interesting to try to wrestle with that stuff, but not have it take over the project.
When Phil and I were talking about naming this, and we decided on Grady Hendrix as a vampire, the way you're talking about immortality and millennia versus centuries, you really are a vampire, aren't you?
It's I don't like to brag about it because I've got a big body count behind me, but yeah, I thought it was obvious.
Well, Phil, this is how it ends. We interview Grady Hendrix, and then he drinks our blood and kills us. But good luck with my blood. You're going to find it a little foul tasting there, my friend. So I got vampire protection with lymphoma.
My goodness.
That's something that's always interesting when people wrestle with it especially in the big glut of vampire books in the 80s and 90s is, I sucked the blood of someone who was drunk, or someone who was on acid, or someone who has leukemia, or someone who, is going through chemotherapy. And what does that do to the vampire? I've always thought that was really interesting to watch authors wrestle with that.
Well, that was what they covered that in What We Do in the Shadows. Like they would go.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, they did. They would go to the bar and then drink the blood of people who were drinking, and So.
Oh, is that show any? I just started watching the show.
Phil, it's hysterical.
I'm one episode in.
I'm saving season 2 for Halloween because I always watch that, and I watch Angel, a Vampire with a Soul, and it's just hysterical. It's one of the best things I've seen. Like Matt Berry is in it, and he's wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah, I was sort of dubious about it because I'd liked the movie a lot, and I was like, it's really great.
It is.
Nice. Well, episode 2 tonight for me then.
Definitely.
And I have to say, one of the things I thought was really interesting is the energy vampire is a real thing that's been around since the 19th century. And in fact, a ton of early vampires were energy vampires. They were just people who just made you really, really, really sleepy until you stopped waking up.
He's the best character. My wife loves that character, the energy vampire. And I want to give a shout out to Mark Allen Gunnels, who's done some wonderful fiction for us, and he's an incredible author, and he supports a lot of authors out there. His new book, 324 Abercorn, which is a traditional haunted house ghost story book, is now out from Crystal Lake Press, and you can find links for that at our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com. Congratulations, Mark, and we'll be playing more of your fiction on later episodes of the show.
So what's next for Grady Hendrix? What can we look forward to?
Well, I've got a novel coming out in 2021 called The Final Girl Support Group, about a support group for final girls from horror movies. I've got another novel coming out in 2022. I'm just in the middle of wrapping up a nonfiction book I'm doing with this guy, Chris Bajali, about martial arts movies coming to America, which is sort of this big history of like 70s exploitation filmmaking. But also what's been really interesting is a real history of martial arts and martial arts sort of like in entertainment in the US, which is just goes into so many incredible weird corners I wasn't aware of, like a whole sort of Japanese judo scene in the 20s and a huge surge in African-American martial arts in the 60s and 70s. It's been really fascinating to put that together. I've got this horror store movie I'm writing and a couple of other film projects. So God, it just feels like a lot. I come into my office every day and I drag my weary ass home around like 8 at night. And but it's nice. It's really, I'd rather have more work than less. And it's nice to have this many opportunities.
Absolutely. A lot is better than less. Exactly.
Yes.
It keeps you busy. And it keeps you moving forward and looking forward to the next thing. And I'm looking very much forward to your next book in 2021 and 2022.
Yeah, it's finished. I'm just doing rewrites on it right now because I've got to knock it back. I can't have it happen now because we would have to have coronavirus in it and stuff. And it's just not that book. So I'm having to knock it back in time and do some rewrites.
That's, perfect. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. To it. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, so I was going to say, so the 2022 book, is that with Quirk or is that?
No, that's going to be with Berkeley. I just signed up with them. Yeah. Southern Book Club's my last book for the time being for Quirk, but the stuff they do is really great. And so I'm going to be back, no doubt.
Wonderful. That's great news. Grady, it's been wonderful to have you here.
Oh, yeah, it's been very cool. It's been a good conversation.
No, thanks for having me.
We appreciate. And I believe you just hung out with a friend of mine, Max Booth, on his podcast. If I read that properly.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Max is the owner, him and Lori, of Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and they published my literary, crazy, wild, reality-bending novel about Andy Kaufman and surviving cancer, destroying the tangible illusion of reality. We're searching for Andy Kaufman. I'm sorry, Max. I'm so sorry. I didn't. Kind of.
Oh, yeah, I had no idea. That was a blast to do.
Yeah, Max is a good friend, and we sort of came up and sort of writing and publishing together. But Grady, it's been great having you on the show, and I know you've made Phil's year, and you've really... I've really enjoyed speaking to you, too. This is episode 146 of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show. Now go over to the website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com to find a page for every episode, all 146, where you're going to find links to our guests, their website, and their content, plus expanded material, interviews, our archive of ghost stories, and I'm always adding to with audio narrative components, plus recipes now. And this will be in July when this plays, so we'll be moving into August and then starting to plan our fun Halloween, which hopefully we can get out to some haunted houses and, do a live show somewhere, Phil.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we can all do that.
Thank you so much, Grady, for coming on the show. This has been incredible.
No, dude, thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Well, this is T. Fox Dunham.
And this is Phil Thomas.
Zombies are just sort of like, I'm up out of the ground and I'm going to eat your brain, and like, we're not fancy.
T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Books. A television series based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox's story in the Stargate anthology Points of Origin from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Fox is an active member of the Horror Writers Association, and he's had published hundreds of short stories and articles. His motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time. Find out more information at www.tfoxdunham.com.
Phil Thomas is an author and screenwriter from the suburbs of Philadelphia. His screenplays have been produced into 2 feature films, False Face and Always from Darkness, and are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon Prime on demand. His screenplay, 3 Tunnels, was a semi-finalist at the LA Screenplay Competition. He is a member of the International Association of Professional Writers and Editors, and he currently writes for Cultured Vultures, Game Skinny, and BloodyDisgusting.com. He formerly held the position of Senior Marketing Manager at Eternal Press, and was a journalist for Patch, where he wrote a daily tech column covering the latest electronics and gadgets. He lives in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and is currently working on his second novel, Worst Afterlife Ever.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.